If I recall correctly, line of sight in this system is pretty simple. We have a couple of blocking things, any kind of dwelling, fire hexes. There's possibility buildings at least can be turned into fire, wooded hexes, any combat units, and then elevation differentials. And basically this is your standard kind of, if you can read the map and understand, how it's working, it's your standard kind of, if the blocking terrain is closer to the lower target, it's going to block you. If, well, if one, if the higher target, if there's two targets, a higher and a lower, and there's a potential blocking terrain in the midst of them. Now, obviously, if they're on the same level and the blocking unit is between them, it blocks, and if they're both elevated above, they can fire over it. Although, I don't know if some of the things are considered taller blocking terrain. Now, I'll tell you, there's not a lot of a rule on here, and if you're not familiar with tactical war games, you probably can't easily intuit everything having to do with the blocking terrain from this, but it's pretty standard if you've seen other games of the nature. Redoubts and bastions, they're an elevation higher than their immediate surroundings. Massed targets. If a target has more than 9 increments in it, it's massed. And now it'll get an addition to the die roll for every increment over 9. And this is only in the fire combat. Again, it's not on here. And it's not on here. So as far as I can tell, this is, again, something you just have to remember. And, there's a reason player aids exist. And, yes, there's a significant amount of information on these. But it does seem to me that more information could be provided, unless it's, like, dug in here somewhere. But I don't see it. Okay, in order to actually fire, you take the hex that's the target of the fire attack. I think I've already essentially done this. Here again, it goes over as it did in formations, which unit, how many increments fire out of something. A unit in a line, only 4 increments per hex can fire. And you look it up on the fire effects table, find your proper multiplier, and get a value. In skirmish, I think you just get the... Nope, you get a multiplier there too. If you're in square, again, you have a multiplier. If you're in column or general order, however, you'll be using the printed combat firepower value on the counter. Now, it's possible that might be modified, but in general, it's not. In order to make the fire, you find your odds between, remember, the defender has a value 2. I think you probably rounded in the defender's favor. And you get a column, and you roll an 11 to 66 die roll there. And if you get a natural roll, you have a chance of wounding a leader. I think it's only 1 leader on any given roll. If you have an assault marker, oh boy. I remember this being no, this wasn't it. This was a cute little statement. So basically, if you want to fire at something, but they word it terribly. Units marked for assault may only fire on units their assault marker designates. No, that's fine. Likewise, units that are target of an assault may only fire on units that have targeted them with an assault marker. Yeah, that's perfectly clear. I misremembered that. But anyway, quite simply, if you're doing an assault or being assaulted, these are the units that you're paying attention to. Artillery is, of course, limbered or unlimbered. Up to 4 increments can be in a hex. The limbered artillery can stack with infantry or cavalry. Looks like not unlimbered. Interesting. Again, I have to rework these anyway for other reasons. But the stacking, it doesn't... I don't know. I know you can stack with squares, so I don't know. I don't know what they mean here about limbered can stack with infantry or cavalry. Okay, maybe we'll get further. Unlimbered artillery can only stack with formed infantry, so it is allowed to stack, but remember, only when there's a leader present, which means my artillery is going to be exposed, unless I have a leader in that hex. The game has a prolong rule, which allows unlimbered artillery, if it's in command and part of an active MU, to move forward or backward 1 hex, only in clear terrain. And you can go across slopes. When stacking infantry or cavalry, with infantry or cavalry, artillery has a stacking ratio of 1 to 4. Yeah, and this doesn't make much more sense in the chart. In other words, okay, maybe we'll come to the rule here. The increment of artillery is equal to 4 increments of cavalry or infantry. Okay, so, if you're allowed 18 infantry in a space, well, you're allowed 4 points of artillery and 2 more infantry or something like that. 1 battery of artillery may fire from a mixed stack of infantry and artillery if the infantry is in line. Up to 4 increments of infantry can also fire at the same time, but they have to fire at the same hex and combine their fire factors, which means this is going to be a range of 1 fire if they do combine. The artillery has to have the same orientation of the units it's stacked with. Orientation is facing in this game. It's just one of their, let's use a special rule, special word for it. Certain stacks of artillery can combine fire if they're adjacent to the target or if they have leaders with them and they're adjacent to other artillery. Okay, all artillery belonging to the foes, the coalition, has to trace a line of supply to an army artillery wagon, and that's these suckers. The French seem to be immune to that. That belongs to the same nationality. Austrian artillery draw from Austrian, a battery with a maximum range of 8 must trace to an AAW that's rated 8. So each of these artillery wagons has a number as well as a corps or formation designation. That number on it is the maximum range of the types of guns that it's designated to support, which means you're going to be running your artillery wagons around to make sure you have the right ones aligned with the right guns. Makes sense, but it's a layer of detail I'm not used to in most of these games. Most of them that have artillery supply wagons just say, I got supply in here, which I don't know how I feel which way. Obviously this is more detailed, but it could be very annoying. The French don't depend on artillery ammo wagons. They run out of ammo out of special results. If they fire and they roll a natural 11, then they're marked with a blank marker to indicate they're out of ammunition. It may not fire again until it's been resupplied. And now the situation here is you're allowed, basically you put markers like casualty markers underneath the wagon for each point of ammo that it's been drawn from it, and they all carry 6 rounds of fire. To resupply an AAW belonging to the foes, it has to be within 5 hexes of a road, street, or trail leading back to a depot. The These are not depots. Whoa, these are to resupply the wagons. The depots are marked on the map, I believe. I remember seeing some. Oh, maybe that's from a different game. All right. So we don't know where the depots are. Okay. And then they have to roll a 5 or 6 on a die roll. My guess is the depots are probably off map. This can be done once per turn. The path can go as far as you like, and windy and everything, as long as it's road, street, and trails, not broken in any way. Out of supply. French battery don't have to deal with this road hex network. They just resupply on a 1 or 2 no matter where they are. And you could be completely cut off and still find ammo that way. No unit or leader may voluntarily stack with the ammunition, nor may friendly units move through them. If you violate, it's treated as good morale with disorder, which gives you a penalty. An AAW is considered to have 1 increment, and if this is lost, the unit's removed from play. Has a melee value of 1. If it's the target of an enemy artillery fire attack, including ricochets, and the result is 65 or 66, the AAW is considered to have exploded, and that will cause adjacent units to make a morale check because there's crap flying in the air trying to hit them. Artillery has to fire at an adjacent target if it's present. When unlimbered artillery is the target of a fire attack, only even results on the combat few chart. God, I read on the combat and I don't think that it's going to say something weird afterwards in French. Only even results count, and they're going to be modified. A result of 2 causes 1 casualty, of 4 causes 2 casualties. Basically, you skip every other casualty. Whenever unlimbered artillery or a stack of unlimbered artillery units is fired upon, gotta keep checking. Oh shit, I'm over the hour. Fuck. Alright. Well, I'll piece up part of a description. This fucking YouTube restriction on more than an hour is killing me, and it completely creates messes. Okay. So, we've already talked a little bit, let's see. So suppression is where we were. Whenever unlimbered artillery or a stack of unlimbered artillery is fired upon by other artillery and there's a casualty, but it's an odd-numbered loss, you get a blank marker on the battery. This will be a suppressed battery, I guess. And it may not make a fire attack from that moment on for the remainder of the turn. All of these will be removed during reorganization segment. Now there are plenty of blanks in the game, but I just swapped them into my overall bag of blanks. So we'll figure out something to use. So here's the example. Let's see. If a loss of 2 is called for on the fire chart, the stack of artillery takes a loss and is suppressed. Likewise, this is the case with the 3 loss, but not when a battery is stacked with infantry and they absorb the odd losses. Okay. Artillery formation change. They have to roll a die in order to limber. Usual foot batteries, this will be a 5 or a 6. Horse batteries, a 3 through 6. And there's an artillery limbering chart which may be more specific. Artillery leaders give a bonus on this. The range, there's various fire attacks at 3 different ranges. The top right number is long range distance. This is the same as the matching caliber for its corresponding AAW. Top right number is the maximum long range distance. 1.5 times this number will be maximum extreme range. Alright, so let's find an artillery count now. Let's take a look at what they have here. So, yeah, top right is the actual distance of range. You multiply that to get an extreme range. Now these are the firepowers at short, medium, long range. We don't know what happens at extreme range. Attacks made greater than maximum up to extreme are going to be half the fire potential of maximum range. If you're firing at adjacent targets, you'll be able to use, well, you will use canister. The odds column shifts 1 to the right. Medium, long, and extreme range fire have a possibility of passing through their intended target and hitting other units. Alright, this looks like a scary roll. To determine ricochet, the line of sight or shot path is drawn from the firing unit to the target unit, and then along the straight line this creates beyond the target unit up to the firing unit's extreme range. Every unit on this shot path, which is beyond the unit, may be attacked, but for each subsequent attack the dice are modified with a penalty of -6. You recalculate the odds as if this is a brand new attack with the new strength, etc. Roll the dice again and subtract 6. A third attack would see dice modified by -12, etc. Theoretically, you can do damage to anything on here, but eventually your modifiers are going to be so bad that you can't hit anything. Howitzers and mortars do not have to have a line of sight to their target. Howitzers do not have a medium or extreme range, only short and long, and thus medium, long, and extreme, short and long, and thus their shots do not ricochet. Well, that doesn't follow, but I assume we can kind of ignore that whole statement and just say their shots do not ricochet. The short range for howitzers and mortars is 2 hexes. They conduct fire attacks on targets 2 hexes or adjacent, just like regular artillery. At 2 hexes, the howitzer must have line of sight. Howitzers get canister benefit at adjacent targets. I'm guessing mortars do not. And that's because the bastions actually have some long guns in them. Long-range attacks by howitzers and mortars are conducted the same. Same as what? Put a blank marker on the the same as each other, not the same as anything previous. Place a blank marker on the desired target hex and you roll a die. On a 1 or 2, you hit. Otherwise, if you're greater, the target hex will be a surrounding hex, and I guess, yeah, you roll to see which hex it's going to be in. Whenever a howitzer or mortar rolls a 65 or 66 naturally, in addition to any losses caused, the attack hex will be considered on fire, unless this attack's made on August 27th, probably raining or something. When an artillery counter is removed from play, as a result of losses, it'll be placed in the battery box found on the chronology le battle. Over here. Okay, so we see the use for that. At the start of each hour, 1/3 of the batteries in this box will be removed or be returned to play, and Allied units return at friendly depot hexes. We're gonna have to find out where those fucking depots are. I don't see anything that looks like depots. I don't see any counters that serve as depots. I don't know of any rules that serve as depots. Wow. Gosh. Look at the terrain key. Do we see anything that says depot? We do not, so we're going to assume that we can't find it on here. Yeah. I don't know what they are. Maybe they'll be called out somewhere. And French batteries go back in the all stat or new stat. The remaining 2/3 will go back on the organizational display, which is how you represent dead units, or units that aren't deployed yet. For example, if we look at, there's a lot of these here. Oh, these are commanders. I have a feeling these things should be on the map somewhere. But if we look at something like this, yeah, maybe this should be on the map too. Uh-oh. No. So this is one of those examples where the regimental unit is over here, and the 2 battalions are on the map or something. Okay. These have to be of like kind and same nationality, incremental value, and movement potential in order to make this exchange. If they're not of like kind, they just sit in that box until you've taken enough losses. Whenever unlimbered artillery is removed from play, due to melee, you roll a die and there's a chance it's spiked and won't go into that box. It'll just go onto the organizational display, and thus it won't come back. The 1/3 doesn't play into effect. Artillery can change its facing if it's target of an assault or charge à cheval, but not an infantry. Oh, no, that's an infantry charge. Okay. It has the option to change its facing via a complete about face, unless it's already facing an enemy unit. It looks like it can only do a 180. Grand batteries. Artillery leaders of special ability can form grand batteries. This is a string of contiguous hexes exclusively containing artillery batteries and an artillery leader of special ability. The minimum size is 3 contiguous hexes with at least 1 point of artillery in each hex, and 1 artillery leader of special ability. The other leaders can be part of it. If there's no artillery leaders of special ability in a game, then no grand batteries can be formed. In addition to other fire, this will allow the artillery action chit to give you another shot with your artillery. And that's where we're going to stop for tonight, because I'm pretty tired. But, you know, we made some ground. Major potential improvement in my gaming life overall. I've added some removable tape. I hope this stuff doesn't do damage. I was using it on Le Grand Guerre, and it worked fine there. This is not the same kind of texture though, so but we're gonna give it a shot. Probably shouldn't use it in the middle, but that's where I really need it, is, you know, because I can use the post-its here, but in the middle trying to use them as sticky on both sides type stuff, doubling it up and stuff, just does not work. I've tried that with other games and it ends up being more trouble than it's worth. Anyway, let's get to the assaults or melees. These can only happen in the melee à cheval. Oh, by the way, somebody pointed out that their French is just terrible as well. I know not enough about French to be able to say it, but their use of things like combat à la feu is just totally off base anyhow. There's no way somebody who knew French would do that. So it's just this stupid affectation, and given that it damages the ability to access the game easily, it's just really ridiculous. Anyway, there's a lot of affectation to this system, though. Okay, so this happens in the melee à cheval and assault et melee in the chronologie of battle. Yeah, okay, that's spelled as chronology. But still, instead of, you know, whatever. Anybody who's already marked with an assault marker because of the movement phase will be fighting here. Several hexes may be assaulting a single hex, but they are defined as a single assault. As the active player defines each assault first, the defending player, then the attacking player, units, sorry, I said player there both times, belonging to that assault makes a pre-morale check. If the defender stands and the attacker passes, the combat odds will be tabulated by comparing the sum of their melee strengths, and that'll be, we got your standard odds type chart here, with some weird ones like 3.5 to 1 that, yeah, mean you kind of have to use a calculator, but this odds ratio is located, the dice are rolled, the result located. Assault is going to be mandatory between adjacent opposing units that are marked with an assault marker, regardless of what else may have happened in between. Combat units may only assault units that they fired upon. Okay, so this is a lie. This is a poorly stated rule. But, you know, shit like that drifts into rules. It shouldn't happen 30 years into a system. Of course, it is a complete rewrite, but here it's written. Combat units may only assault units that they fired upon in the previous feu d'attaquer, which is not what it's actually called, I don't believe. I believe the assault is called feu d'assault. Here, let's make up new French in here and now. It doesn't exist over here, I don't believe. No, it's offensive fire phase here. Yeah, come on, folks. All right. Combat units may only assault units that they fired upon in the previous feu d'attaquer segment of the chronology of battle. Okay, sounds like if you did not fire, you can't assault. No, in other words, a unit may not fire on one unit and melee another. Why not just fucking say that? You spend 3 sentences to say that are kind of complicated to say what the second sentence could have completely done. And so much of the rules is like that, but this is one that particularly stood out in my mind. But a lot of it is. I know I haven't pointed out many because I am skimming largely, and that's how I react to this kind of rule book, which, of course, it means that I miss things, right? Okay. You define the assault, I guess, and you do these kind of sequentially. The pre-morale check, okay, first an odds ratio is tabulated by comparing all eligible assaulting increments to all eligible defending increments. Unit in line only have 4 eligible increments per hex for this check. If this ratio is greater than or less than 1 to 1, then the morale will be modified by the modifier found in the final odds on the assault morale table. Okay. I don't remember seeing this table, which is why I'm being... There we go. That's why I don't remember seeing it. Okay. Now, it's always going to be greater or less than 1 to 1 unless it's perfect, but maybe there's a rounding factor in there. We'll see. I don't remember seeing any standard rounding rules or any such. And we'll get a modifier for the morale to both the attacker and the defender there. The defending unit's first check morale, subject to the modifiers. And you roll the dice once for the stack and compare it to the modified result to the morale of the top defending unit. If this unit passes, then everybody in the stack is fine. If it fails, then each subsequent unit in the stack, let's keep the terms right because they might mean you stop at some point, compares their morale with the same number but with a -3 modifier. Okay, so it sounds like top unit, if it's good, it holds up. And everything holds. If it's not good, all the remaining units have to check. And then they say if any defending units stand, the assaulting units now make the morale check using their modifiers prior to the retreat of any of the defending units, as if the original stack were still there. You roll the dice for the stack, for each stack. No, for the stacks. Once, I guess, yeah. and compare the modified result to the morale of the top assaulting unit in just one stack if there's more than one. Now this gets weirder. If there are multiple assaulting stacks, roll for each individually, which is not what the rest of the rule sounded like, but I guess it applies. If the top, and this is what I mean, they meander and then reverse what you'd think, and or never actually nail to the rule in some cases, but here they at least got to something that looks definitive. If the top unit passes, then all units in the stack pass the check. If it fails, each subsequent unit rolls with -3 checks with -3 modifier. And that means if you have your best unit on top, they're all going to fail if it fails. Assaulting units failing this check, disorder. See disordre. Let's not use English for that. Hey, they put a reference in. That's pretty amazing. We should highlight that. There aren't many of those in here. Any units that pass the check now actually go to the melee. Also at this time, active units that pass the pre-morale check may advance into hexes vacated by eligible reactive units that exercise their option to retreat before combat. If you fail your check, you're not going to get to complete the attack even though the enemy withdrew. If this advance brings them adjacent to another enemy unit, they may now assault it without another pre-morale check, or the defender getting a feud de chance or feud de provoque, unless there are British light companies present, but there are none at Dresden. Okay, but there's another exception there, which is all skirmishers, I believe, prevent that second assault. I think we saw that somewhere. Damned if I remember where, though. God, this is going to be a fucking nightmare, isn't it? Retreat before combat. Trilliers may see Trilliers. No reference. God. I mean, this could be done so... If it was done like any other game, any other war game that's made by a company that's lasted as long as Clash of Arms has. And Clash of Arms games aren't all like this. Yes, there are some that are. Hi, Hair Doctor. It's not this bad. I mean, those rules are a mess. They aren't like this. They have problems. Okay, so now we have to wade through this whole paragraph because they're bloated rules to try to find what we're looking for because we vaguely remember something. Once this option is exercised by the trillier or the active unit may occupy the vacated hex if it performs a check. No, I'm not seeing it there. So there was some difference between trilliers retreating and other units. Maybe it's here. Trilliers may always retreat before combat. If their potential is greater than the movement, infantry deployed as trilliers may fire independently. I don't know. I'm not seeing it. I remember there being this rule. And that's going to be a real problem. I'm going to remember things and maybe they don't exist. Or maybe I just can't find them, which is the most likely. And we'll try to fake it as best as we can. Like, I barely remember the ricochet rule, which I've read several times. Okay, where are we? Okay, so I guess the defender can always plow through. But I seem to remember something that said they couldn't before. But this seems to overrule that. We'll go with whichever one we find at any given time. Assaulting or defending units that were already in disorder and fail a pre-morale check immediately rout. Defending units that fail a pre-morale check and are adjacent to enemy cav in good order immediately rout. Wow, we're going to have trouble remembering all this shit. Rather than disorder, Or if their retreat after combat places them at any time adjacent to enemy cav, their disorder becomes a rout. Defending units in general order do not make a pre-morale check. Only the assaulting units do. And that's not because, hey, being kind of semi-disordered is a good thing. It's because the terrain's helping them. Cavalry never makes pre-morale check on attack or defense. Assaulting units may advance to the hex vacated by reactive units that failed their pre-morale check. They may not, however, initiate a second melee. Maybe this is what maybe we saw a reference to that. I don't remember. If all defending units in a hex fail their pre-morale check, the assaulting units do not make this check themselves. Likewise, an empty hex may be assaulted if the hex had been a target of assault and became empty due to offensive fire. The defending unit being eliminated, that's to allow you to push forward. And that's kind of an edge case. This won't allow a second assault. That's an edge case because, hey, we were so successful. Why would we not take the hex? And that's a common problem that games sometimes have. That you have to kind of fit the edge case in. Infantry and artillery with a printed morale of 11 through 14 never modify their morale due to the odds on the assault table. This includes units with a dash morale, which can't fail. Defending units that fail a pre-morale check disorder at 1/2 their movement rate, which I understand what they mean. It's not the cleanest way to say it, but whatever. If the terrain is impassable and the unit cannot execute its retreat, it surrenders. And there they specify. That means it's eliminated, nothing else. In addition to other modifiers, assaulting units will modify their pre-morale check by -3 for every loss they took from the feu de provoques, defensive fire, because we have to say it twice, because they used a fucking French term, in the defensive fire phase immediately and why not in the, see the assault morale modifiers table. Okay, here's the assault morale modifiers, and they do indeed spell out some other stuff here, so that's going to be useful. Okay. The melee itself, I'll give you some results. If it's blank, the result hangs in the balance. What's blank? I'm not seeing any blanks, so I shouldn't even read this, right? Everything seems to have a value in it, a DD, DR, 1, whatever. Okay, so I think we can ignore that, because that's not in my assault table. Blank result. Okay. It's not blank, it's if it's in this little square. Okay, the result hangs in the balance. Probably was different before. Only applies to infantry and defending artillery. 1 increment is lost by the defending and attacking forces. The defender rolls to stand again, if not in general order. If he passes, the attacker rolls a pre-morale check. If the attacker is successful, you redo an assault with new odds, if necessary. This can go on for a while at low odds, bringing into opposition 2 of Napoleon's maxims. Yeah, cavalry that melee and achieve a, let's combine words. That's me. A blank result will bounce. I always thought bounce was a minis term, and I don't know. I don't think it has any relevance outside of the minis community, which is to say, I don't think it's a term. I don't think, the French were saying, yes, we charged that square and we bounced. Anyway, the attacker or defender routs on an AR or DR result. 1 increment is lost for each enemy zone of influence in the path of retreat. So it looks like there's no actual casualties from that. Attacker or defender is disordered. 1 increment lost for each enemy zone of influence exited. DS, defender surrenders, they're just taken out. 2 numbers, like 1 and 4, the attacker and defender lose that many increments. Or, if an asterisk, if an asterisk accompanies the number, the unit then makes a morale check as well. But it doesn't look like the combat continues in that case. Disordre en second. I don't see that here, but I assume it's DS. No, that's defender surrenders. All right, well, let's see. Whenever a unit in disorder suffers a second disorder, okay, it becomes PGD. Thus, a DD or AD could become a DRAR instead. Units only check morale as a result of melee if the chart calls for it. Oh, exception. See losses and their effects on morale levels. If a unit exits multiple zones of influence, only one increment is lost by the routing or disordered unit per hex on its path of retreat. If multiple units are exerting a zone on the same hex, it doesn't count as multiple for casualties. A square that disorders or routes doubles its losses during its path of retreat. If a stack of units is forced to retreat and then only one increment is lost, regardless of how many units are in the stack for each enemy zone of influence, i.e. if you can retreat the stack together through zones of influence, you take one hit for each. It doesn't matter how many units there are. Okay, consolidation, advance after assault. All assaulting units must enter the assaulted hex after a successful melee. All facing in formation of advancing units must conform to the entered hex. If they're in different formations, they adopt column. I'm not sure what happens if their facings are going to be different from this, which it normally will be the case. Because, for example, if I'm attacking this hex from here and this hex from here, well, that's allowable because I'm both going forward. But if I'm attacking from here, one unit's going to be facing this way, one unit's going to be facing that way. Let's see if that's handled. Because remember, they have to have the same facing if they're in the same hex. If any stacking limit is violated at the end of the advance, the units perform a morale check. And I assume have to unstack. Roll the dice once for the stack, modified by +6, since they're flush with success, plus any other modifiers. Hope that's in the chart. Do they give the chart? It's 12.4, but the charts don't seem to have numbers. A stacking chart. Yeah. I'm looking to see if there's an overstacking penalties chart. Yeah, I'm not seeing that. I thought there was a chart, but it may be embedded in the rules somewhere. Okay. Okay, displaced. Let's see. If too many increments remain in the hex after this. Okay, so we get more here. Compare the modified dice result to each unit's morale. Those that pass remain in the hex. Those that fail, disorder, and retreat. If too many increments remain in the hex after this, displace sufficient units to bring the total to where it's supposed to be. Displaced units should return to the hex from which they launched their assault. Units that advanced after assault may be forced to change presentation. What's presentation? They may have to suck into a regiment, I guess. That is, if the hex taken by the attacker has a limit of 10 increments or 1 battalion and the attacker advances a regiment of 24 increments into it, the regiment must immediately break down into its component battalions after performing the overstacking morale check. Roll once for the regiment. If it passes, the most senior battalion remains in the hex. The other units are displaced. Note that units in disorder that pass a morale check stay in disorder. They don't recover from this. The units in disorder that defend or attack and have thus passed a pre-morale check will conduct melee while they're in disorder. Whew. Assault morale table used for the pre-morale check. No, didn't we have this? We have a modifier. Minus. It looks different. Odds 1 to 3, minus 18, plus 18. Note that the separate chart provided with the game will have modifiers listed at the bottom specific. Well, these aren't the same charts. They're close. Plus 12, minus 18 matches. There's no 6 to 1. +6 -6 for 3 to 1 is +3 -9 here. I mean, what the fuck, you know? This rulebook was written for this game, with specifics entered into it for this game. This chart was made for this game. You can tell there's a map of Dresden here. I guess you use whichever one you want at any given time. I'm certainly going to use this one because it's on the thingy. In addition to modifiers, remember to modify assaulting units due to losses. And it's break time for a bit. We'll see if we can get through more of this. I've been breaking, you know, without warning, like 10 minutes before the hour mark or whatever, because of you turds policies now. And I'm sorry for whatever confusion that creates. It certainly creates some stress for me. Okay, let's take a look at losses now. Make sure I got a fair amount of time. So losses are normally just going to be taken right off the top unit of the hex, and you mark them by adding casualty markers to them, I guess. Exceptions, though, is infantry with unlimbered artillery. Artillery takes the losses on even as in counter battery fire, while the infantry suffers on odd, which to me means it's not just from counter battery fire that you can shoot the artillery, you end up hitting it in normal fire as well. No artillery suppression occurs. When the hex is the target of medium, long, and extreme range artillery fire, the losses are proportioned equally among all units of the stack. That makes sense. Losses and their effects on melee. When a unit loses an increment, the melee strength is reduced proportionally to the percentage the loss represents of the unit's overall fighting strength. Now, this is fucking insane. Right? I mean, this is where we're starting to get into the, oh look, we're not even talking about as easy as minis anymore. Because minis will generally say, hey, figures, you figure out how many figures you have and multiply that maybe or whatever. And that's what you have. So as you lose figures, it's reasonable. And games like Terrible Swift Sword follow that. They have strength points. This game has strength points. No, what you're going to do is take the number that they've made up for the value of the item and then start doing some proportional math on it, which means you're going to need calculators to do everything in this game. Effects on fire strength. Artillery reduces its strength the same manner it reduces melee strength proportionally. That's not that big a deal because there's usually not many increments in an artillery piece. The printed fire of infantry is not reduced until the unit's overall increments brings its loss down to a strength of 1 increment. Then the printed value is halved. Now this is not a big deal. Like, this sounds crazy because, well, wait a minute, you're allowed 4 increments firing. Yeah, but you only use the printed value in like general order and column, and it's going to be less than the line value. When in line or trailer, the fire value of the unit is based on the amount of increments times the fire multiplier of that type of unit, right? Skirmish factor and lance bonus. The skirmish value of cavalry is not so much its fire value as its ability to harass. Though when cavalry skirmishes, the combat off few chart is used. For every 3 increments lost, the skirmish value of a light cav is reduced by 1. And of course, there's no way that all this could be baked into the charts. It's just too fiddly a system to do that, right? I don't consider this a particularly complex concept, nor is it a particularly effective, detailed concept. It's just one that seems designed to be particularly inconvenient to the players. And much seems that way. Cavalry reduces its lance bonus by 1 for every 3rd increment lost. Infantry battalions that have lost 50% of their starting increment subtract 6 from the die roll when checking morale. And I believe this is listed here. This is the thing we were looking at, which we thought was the formation losses, maybe. That's somewhere in these charts. I mean, this is one problem. You want to give charts, but you also want to give as few charts as possible. You want to make the game simple enough that you don't need this many charts. You know, I'm not seeing it. Maybe it ain't in there. Or maybe it's kicking around somewhere else. Yeah. Morale level summary. Here it is. Yeah. So this is the percent loss of the organization in battalions. So that's something different. That's the organization loss, I think. So this doesn't seem to be listed anywhere. Let's see if we've... Yeah, this is something different, and it's not mentioned anywhere that I've seen. Exceptional elite battalions that have a morale of 14 or less don't take this effect. When it loses 50% of its current strength, is that different from starting increments? As a result of current strength, yeah, gotcha. As a result of a single combat event, it makes a morale check at -6, and this should be listed in here, I hope. Oh. So here's other modifiers. When a unit loses 50% of its increments due to a single combat event, that doesn't quite word this out in alignment with this, but whatever. But for every increment lost to defensive fire, the assaulting unit takes a penalty leader morale terrain. Okay, so here, the modifier that I'd expect to see in here is not covered. The one from here is not covered in here. And here's another thing. Yeah, that's it. This may be considered morale value, but it's not quite the same thing. The morale value, as far as I'm concerned, is the larger formation value, but who knows? But this one's a specific that's weird. Infantry regiments that have suffered 50% in casualties must involuntarily break down into their component battalions, proportioning the losses. Also, when regiments voluntarily break down, the losses must be equally distributed. Now, this is important that you must break down, because what it means is you lose your regimental cohesion, which allows you to be in a big stack without a leader. I don't know how much value there is to being in that big stack without a leader. You can't road move fast in a more compact fashion because of it. But if you want to field the whole unit, instead you're going to have, and what's worse is you've taken losses, so you're going to have a scattering of little units. When you fail minimum requirements to be deployed in your current formation, you must change formation. Cavalry. Okay, special rules for Cav. I think we're going to stop here and load up, because cavalry charges and such not, those are always going to be a major complexity in Napoleonic and earlier eras. Once you get after Napoleonic, the cavalry start becoming less and less effective. But certainly in any Napoleonic game, and in this one definitely, there's going to be a significant amount of rules overhead to them. So I think this is a natural stopping place.